Hey everyone. All right, I think we are live. Cool. So, hi everyone. Welcome to today's session. And today we are going to talk. Today we are going to talk about HTML, CSS, and bit of DOM manipulation. So, before we start with today's discussion, good afternoon. Hi. Cool. So, welcome to today's workshop. And basically, my name is Ansura, and I'm a software engineer at Postman. I've been working with basically developing web apps at scale, and I have a total of 2.5 year experience. Also, I'm instructor at AccioJob, and I teach front end module at AccioJob. So, yeah, so we have a couple of people joining up. Hey, hi. Right, right. Cool. Okay. So let me give you a brief about uh, today's workshop, and then we will start. All right. So we are basically going to talk about HTML, CSS, and DOM manipulation. And these are basically one of the very important topics when you are preparing for a front end. If you're looking for a front end developer, these are the basically the basic topics that you should be good with, and they are also quite important. So we'll be going through that. I think if you are here, I'm assuming you might be having a bit of idea about HTML and CSS and JS. We'll cover that. If you don't have, don't worry about it. We are totally fine with that. And we'll talk about what is a web app, the client server architecture of a web app. And we'll talk about what is DOM and basically how does our browser create this DOM tree. We will actually go and see a DOM tree of a web page, right? So this is going to be an interesting one. And at the end, I think after that we'll do a live project, and basically we'll create a crypto dashboard, and there we'll be basically using DOM manipulation. And the interesting part about this live project is that we're going to basically manipulating DOM dynamically. We'll be basically adding and removing DOM elements using JS. Obviously, we're going to be adding event listeners, and we'll also use a fetch API to get fetch this data from a server, right? So in that process, we'll also cover async and await, right? So if you see the structure, I think we at AccioJob basically follow the similar structure. So whenever we teach a particular topic, our focus is to basically understand the why of the topic, right? So the good thing in development that whatever you study and okay. Screen is not clear. Yeah, I think should be fine now. This I think, yeah, should be fine now. Yes, I can see it clearly on my other screen. Cool. So I think so. Whenever we teach a topic in AccioJob, the thing that we try to understand is why of a problem. So basically, the good thing about development is every topic in development basically solves a specific problem, right? So we should understand that why it exists at the very first place, and then we will go and see the basically the why of it. So if we are studying about the DOM manipulation, we will see why of it, why do we study it, and then we will see the what, right? So we talk about why, and then we talk about what. And then the last thing is how, right? So these are three things that we basically cover, and then we try to basically address all of them, especially the how the part, using a live product, right? A live project. So that's how we teach at AccioJob also. So in today's session also, our whole framework is going to be revolving around that. I can see Amritra is not clear. All right. Cool. So the first thing that we are going to discuss is basically about a web app, right? So in today's world, if you go and see, like we are revolving around the web app, right? So you open a browser and you can access any of your web app. All you need to do is that you should have a web browser installed on your system. I can see some people want me to see. All right. Yeah, let me open it. Let me know in case it freezes. So I will try to increase the bandwidth. All right. For example, if you want to access Google, all you need to do is that open your browser, go and type in this google.com and hit enter, and you will see the Google pages loads onto your browser, right? So this is an Google this app. This is a web app. You are accessing it using your browser, and all right, yeah. So right. So let's see that how does this whole thing is happening behind the scene, right? So if you see basically any web app, so every web app that is present, it has basically, it follows something called as client server architecture, right? So you have a client, and then you have a server, right? So this client is basically nothing but your browser. So in order to access a web app, you need to have this client, which is nothing but your web browser. So you install your browser, then you go and basically access this any web app. What you need to do is that to access any web app, you go and type in a URL, right? So in our case, we went ahead and we typed in with google.com, right? Google.com. So when you basically typed in, you are actually reaching out to Google server, which is present on internet somewhere, and the address of it is actually encoded inside this URL, right? So when you type in this google.com, basically your browser gets the address of this server, which is present on cloud, on internet, right? And basically the address is called as IP address, right? So it's basically IP address in technical. If I have to give a technical name of this address, this is IP address, right? So your browsers find this IP address using something called as a DNS call, right? And then it connects to your server, right, using TCP connection, right? Not going to discuss this in very detail, but let's basically see this, right? So it establishes a TCP connection, and basically it make a request, and then the server send back something, right? So if I go back here in google.com, and if I open this network tab, and basically again go and type in www.google.com, you will see that we are making a request, right? You can see your browser has made a request, right, to Google, and in response we got an HTML file, right? So if I go and see you a bit information about this request, you are making this request to this URL. There's something called as request method, and then this is the status code, right? So status code 200 means that this is success. All right, so this is fine. So in the response, you can clearly see that this is an HTML file, right? In fact, if I copy this and open it inside my VS Code, you will get to see this is as an HTML file, right? So here, basically, the server is basically returning you an HTML file, right? So you see that every web app that is present have a client and server architecture, and it follows basically the client and server architecture. So this is a brief introduction about what are client server architecture, right? Yeah. So I think this should be clear to everyone about the client server architecture. It's clear, increasing quality from every device. All right. I think should be clear. Yeah. So someone said, "What is server?" Deepak. Okay. So basically, a server is basically, you can see that a server is basically a piece of code which is sitting on a remote machine, right? And it is taking a request. So it can take a request and it can send you some response. So in our example, basically, you made a request, right? And then the server send you this HTML file, right? So this is what server is, and this is what server is doing in our client server architecture. Okay, so let me repeat again. So we're talking about the client server architecture of a web app, right? So every web app that you see has basically follows this client and server architecture. So the client is basically, there is a client, and this client is nothing but a browser, right? And then there is a server. So the server is basically, you can see that the server is a piece of code which is sitting somewhere on a remote machine, and you can make a request to it, and then the server will send you some response back. So in our example, when we went ahead and accessed this google.com, when we accessed this google.com URL, right? What we got was, we made a request, we made a get request to the server, and server send us back the HTML file. Right. So this is what I have taught about the client server architecture as of now. Is it clear to everyone? All right. So now let's move forward and talk about basically now what's happens, right? So we got an HTML file, and then the server sends the HTML file, and now what's happens, right? So now what happens is that this browser basically, so this is my browser. It takes this HTML file as an input, right? So this is my HTML file. Take this HTML file as an input, and then basically it start parsing it, right? So all right, all right. So the browser start parsing this HTML file, and if you let me show you a sample HTML file, right? How does a simple HTML file look like? So if I show you, this is how HTML files look like, right? I think everyone should be familiar with this. So it contains a bunch of tags. Okay, someone is saying to change the font. Let me do that. This would be fine, I guess. So you can see that this HTML file basically contains a bunch of HTML tags, right? So your browser start reading them basically from top to down, and then basically browser parse your HTML tags, and then it basically need to basically start creating something called as DOM objects, right? So this HTML elements here, basically browser take this HTML element and start creating something called as DOM element. Right. So let me go back here. So browsers start creating something called as yeah. So so the question arises that how does browser create this DOM objects, right? We only have these HTML elements which are present on my machine, right? So how does the browsers create these DOM objects, right? So internally, if you see inside a browser, basically we have something called as DOM API, right? Let me create this. So browser internally stores there is a section called as web APIs, and in this section we have something called as DOM APIs, right? So browser calls this DOM APIs and it gets the DOM objects from using this DOM APIs, right? And so it will start parsing this HTML file. It will basically takes the HTML node as an input, make the DOM API call, and get the DOM object, right? Now once it gets a DOM object, it need to store it somewhere, right? So to store to store this information, it need to use a data structure, right? Now if you basically go and see about if you go and see an HTML file, you can see that if you are creating DOM object for individual HTML elements, for example, let's say if I have a div and then I have a p tag, right? So in this p is basically a child of this div, right? And then this div is basically a child of this body, right? So you have to maintain this parent-child relationship, right? So if you have to store this DOM object, there also you need to maintain this parent-child relation, right? So can anyone think of clear videos, screen videos? Okay. So can anyone think of data structures which can be used to maintain the parent-child relationship? Yeah, tree. So basically, browser store this in a DOM object in something called as a tree, and we call this as a DOM tree. Right? So browser will basically store this whole DOM object inside DOM tree because it needs to store this information in a way so that it can maintain the parent-child and relationship, right? So this is what DOM tree concept is. DOM tree is basically consists of DOM objects which gets created when browser start parsing the DOM object, and browser start passing the HTML file, and these HTML individual DOM objects are actually gets basically created by the individual DOM element HTML elements, right? So and it gets created by the help of the DOM API, right? So now let me show you what a DOM tree look like, how a DOM tree look like by actually giving a live example. So let's say this is my google.com web page. Let me show you the DOM tree of this web page, right? How does browser internally have created a DOM tree for this particular web page, and how it is storing this whole information using the concept of DOM tree. All right. So you can see that if you ever go and see an HTML file, right? So the root of an HTML file start with the HTML tag, right? So you can see that the start of in the DOM tree, the root is HTML, right? And this HTML is not now a simple HTML node, right? It is now an HTML DOM object, So that's the difference. In DOM tree, we store DOM objects, right? While in HTML files, we are storing these are individual HTML elements. So that's the difference that you should have. You should basically understand. So you can see that we have this HTML file, and if you go and observe that just after HTML, we have head, and then we have body. Right? Yeah. So we have head and we have body. So in our example also, you can see in the DOM tree that immediately the child of this HTML are our body as well as the head. So I can show you head also. Yeah, right. Here is the head, and here is body, right? So if you let's go to the head, that what all head is storing, right? So you can see that this so this head is also having a lot of childs, right? So it has a child meta one, link, right? Title, script, text, right? You can see a lot of stuff here, right? And if you go inside this HTML code and expand this head, from where this all this DOM objects has been added inside this head, right? These are all coming from this HTML code, right? So inside this head, all of these HTML elements are actually getting transformed inside into the DOM object, and internally they are getting done by the DOM API, right? All right. So now, if I go and show you the body, right? So this is my body. Let me basically zoom out a bit. Uh, so you can see that this body has couple of childs. So this body has a div, right? Let me minimize this. Yeah, so that you can see it clearly. So this body has, so first of all, it has a style, it has a div, and we have given some class to this div. Then it has another div, and we have given some ID to it. And so this is basically where we are reading the Google, we are decoding the Google DOM tree, right? So, and then there are a couple of scripts that are getting loaded here, right? So this is how the DOM tree looks like. And this is basically a very simple Google web page DOM tree that we have seen. All right. So should be clear. Any doubt about the DOM tree? Div is the name of the right. So the div is the name of the element, right? So this DOM object, the name of the element is div, right? So you can actually go and see that inside this div you have a couple of more divs. There are spans. So these are the name of the elements. Uh, so basically, we are showing this relation, the use of multiple div. I think if you go and create an HTML, you might be writing nested divs. I can also show you the HTML code of Google for you. So you can see this is the HTML code, HTML file for Google web page, right? You might be seeing there are nested divs written inside of this, right? And the equivalent HTML node for this HTML code is what we are seeing here. You can see the you can use some extension. I am using a DOM view extension, Google Chrome extension. You can see it. You can actually go and see them and try to play with these DOM objects. They are super interesting. To visualize your whole HTML code in the concept of DOM tree is super awesome. Why DOM reduce and how was web pages before? So other basically, if you create a web page, right? For example, to create a web page, we need a couple of things, right? So we can create a very simple web page using an HTML, right? And then you can add styling to it using something called as CSS, right? And then you can basically, so let us talk about this as of now. So the very basic web page that was created was consuming only HTML, right? So you can actually, using HTML, you can define the structure of a web page, right? So define the structure of web page. You can do that using HTML. Using CSS, you can style the web page, right? Now this DOM tree is actually this DOM tree gets created for HTML elements, right? For CSS, we have a different tree. We call them as a CSS DOM tree, right? We're not going to touch that. But if you have a very basic, if you have a I mean, without HTML, web page can't exist, right? Because you need to create the structure of the web page, and you have to use HTML for that. So without HTML, you cannot define the cannot create a web page. And these DOM tree are nothing but the basically the HTML elements getting basically represented by the browser internally, in form of a tree, right? So these are simply the HTML elements which basically browsers are internally creating a tree like structure, and they are storing this for every individual HTML element. They are storing a DOM object corresponding to it and storing it inside the DOM tree. uh, for example, let me show one more interesting thing for you to every one of you. So this is how Google web page is looking like, right? Simple and very I think looking very good, right? But as of now, this Google web page is using HTML to define the structure of this web page. It is using CSS to define the styling of it, right? And then you can perform some interaction, right? You can basically add, you can type in something, you can do some clicks, and all of those are getting handled by JS. We will go there eventually after some time. But if I remove, let me basically go and remove all the styling from this, right? So if I remove all the styling from this web page, you can see that this is how it looks like now, right? So if I have to create a Google web page, uh, if I have to create a Google web page, basically using only HTML, this is how it's going to look like, right? This is really bad. I mean, no one is going to use this kind of stuff. So that's where basically CSS comes into the scene, and they allow us to basically add styling to this the web pages and make them look beautiful, right? So some of you can ask me that, okay, for HTML elements, browser store this information of HTML elements in form of DOM tree. For CSS, how does browser in maintaining the information for them, right? So for CSS also, they internally use something called as CSS DOM tree, right? So which is similar to DOM tree itself, just that they are storing the CSS style related objects, and in DOM tree they are storing DOM objects. That's it. That's the difference between all of them. Why should not using Bootstrap for style to web pages? You can use Bootstrap. Bootstrap is nothing but, I think at the end of the day, it is writing CSS for you, right? So these are the predefined classes that's there in Bootstrap, predefined UI components that are there. So you can use Bootstrap. People uses it also. There is no restriction that you should not use Bootstrap for styling. All right. So now you got the hang of. I think you might have got the hang of the importance of CSS, HTML. You saw DOM tree, live DOM tree of Google page, right? Let us now move to basically yeah. Let us now see that why do we need JS, right? So we have HTML and CSS, and I said that we can define the structure of the web page using HTML, right? And this create DOM tree, and you can basically create CSS DOM tree using CSS, right? So browser internally basically use both of them, and then it pass this information to something called as render engine, and this render engine basically renders the UI on the screen, right? So this renders UI on the screen, right? So this is how a single HTML file is getting basically getting rendered on your screen, right? So if you create a very simple HTML and CSS file, I mean every web page gets basically rendered on your screen using this concept. So your browser goes and convert your HTML element into the DOM tree, and browser convert your CSS into CSS DOM tree. Then it pass both of them to render engine. Render engine performs some computation, and then it's render the UI on your screen, right? So this is how it happens. Yeah, cool. Why should not be using it? Now let's see one thing. This is fine. If you create a web page and render it on the UI using HTML and CSS, the question arises: why do we need JS, right? So the problem here is that if you are writing HTML and CSS file, suppose that you created a web page, you write some HTML element to create a responsive website. How to create? Yeah. So the question arises, so you create a very basic HTML web page which contains HTML file, and it contains some CSS file code also, right? Now if the browser is basically creating this DOM tree and CSS DOM tree for you, so there is no way you can manipulate this DOM tree and CSS DOM tree, right? So it will get, so the DOM tree and the CSS DOM tree will remain same no matter how many times you render them. There is no way you can add an element inside this DOM tree. You can update the content of a DOM tree, right? There is no way for you to do that, right? So that's why basically we call them that if you are using only HTML CSS, you can create static web pages. Static web pages meaning you cannot add dynamic content, right, inside these web pages. You cannot add any events in your web pages, right? You cannot add or remove element inside this DOM tree or update the element of the DOM tree, because you do not, I mean, because you don't have that feature to you do not have the tool to update DOM tree, right? So that's why we needed JS, a language which allows us to manipulate with DOM, which allows us to dynamically add element and delete element and update our element from the DOM tree, right? And that's what we are going to be doing. That's what we are going to do in today's practical session also. Yeah, Ganesh. So that merge happens by the render engine. So browser basically compute the DOM tree and CSS DOM tree separately. It passes to the render engine. Render engine perform that, basically listen for something called as runs a cascade algorithm. You can go and check out for that what the cascade algorithm is, right? Meaning that if you are trying to apply a CSS property to an element using different sources, basically your render engine uses a cascade algorithm and picks the final value of that element. So maybe you can Google it out and read about a really good algorithm and really good way people have implemented this algorithm. Okay, so let me do a recap till now that what we have studied, and so that we basically refresh everything. So we started talking about the concept of a web page, right? So every web page basically, if you go and access, like there is any web page which exists, right? It follows this client server architecture. So the first thing that you need to have on your machine is a web browser. You cannot access a web page without a web browser, right? So you need to install this web browser. This web browser has all the capabilities that we talked, right? It can basically make a request to server. It can connect to a server. It can make the request. It can get data from the server, right? And it can parse your HTML file. It can create DOM element, DOM tree. It can create your yeah. It can create your CSS form, right? And then it can render it on the screen. So that's basically the job of browser. That's why you need a browser. Modifying HTML won't make changes in DOM tree. It will, but you cannot do that dynamically, right? So for example, let's say this is your HTML file, right? you can add whatever you want to add, right? But once you basically ship it to, once you share this HTML page to anyone else, and they are using it, how can you dynamically change the content of HTML element, right? How can you add a new element dynamically based on the user action? You cannot do that, right? That's the limitation that we had without JS. Any more questions anyone have till now? Any questions? How to make and use DOM tree? Yeah, so the DOM tree gets created automatically by once you write an initial HTML, right? So whatever you write in this HTML file, your browser will going to pass this HTML file, and it is going to create a DOM tree for you for this HTML file. Now, how can you add more element inside this DOM tree? That we are going to see after some time in today's session itself, obviously. What is JS? JavaScript is basically a language which allows you to basically which allows you to uh, add manipulate DOM, which allows you to basically to basically add events in your web pages and perform some operation whenever those events gets fired, right? So it's a scripting language, to be more precise. Now, what is a scripting language? I think if you're interested, you can go and read about it. I think it's beautiful in its own sense. But yeah, it's a scripting language, and it allows us to manipulate DOM, which ultimately allow us to add interactivity on your web page by updating the DOM content element, by adding and removing DOM elements, as well as creating events and performing some operation on those events. We'll share the certificate links in some time, probably at the back end of today's workshop. Yeah, we'll do that. Yep, I'm using Visual Studio Code. All right. So if you don't have any doubts, let's move forward. So let's basically reach to our today's practical session. So we have understand a basic art. So by now we have a bit of idea that what is a web app is, what is a client, what is a server, what is an HTML file, how does this HTML file gets browser, how does browser parse this HTML file and create DOM tree, what is a DOM tree, and we have seen a DOM tree also. And we have seen CSS. We have seen the effect of CSS. We also have a bit of idea that how does basically browser renders a web page, right? We also had a bit of discussion, why do we need JS, right? Now let's basically go and create a project and see everything that we have discussed till now in practical, right? So now we will be actually going and basically adding the elements in the DOM tree, updating the element from the DOM tree, creating events, firing some actions on the event, right? So we will see everything that we have discussed till now in action. Okay, so let me show you what we are going to be making, right? So what we're going to make is a crypto dashboard, right? So this dashboard basically is basically related to, so you can see all of the cryptos, their icon, their name, their symbol, their current price, their market volume, and their overall percentage change in their price, and then their market cap. Uh, Prerit, I think the difference between the difference between an actual DOM and React DOM, it's interesting. I think it's something that needs a bit of time to discuss. But you can see, you can basically, in a very short, if I have to explain, you can think it like this. In JS, you are actually, so the DOM that you saw, this is basically the browser's DOM, right? So you can see it, you can manipulate it, right? React actually creates a copy of right. React basically create a copy of this actual DOM, and internally it maintains its own separate DOM, right? So, and we call that DOM React DOM, or to more precise, we call them as a virtual DOM, right? Now, whatever update you perform on a React application, it do not basically directly apply it on real DOM. Rather, it make those changes in its in React DOM, and then it basically apply all those changes in the real DOM. So that's a high level difference. I think maybe in coming workshops we have, when we start discussing about React, we'll have a discussion there itself. Yeah, Prayer. I think yeah. Let's the internal working will be basically that will take a bit of time, right? So we'll have maybe when we have a workshop on React, we can discuss the internal working of virtual DOM. Rajesh is saying, what is an API? It is nothing. API is nothing but it's a simple interface through which two systems can talk to each other and they can share some data. As simple as that. That's an API. For example, in our case, when I said that your browser basically need to get the DOM object, right, for individual HTML element, it will call this DOM API, and it will get the DOM object of individual HTML elements from it, right? So as simple as that. All right. So I was where I was. So I was here. So we will be making this dashboard. The interesting part is that all of this whole stuff will be basically we will be rendering this information dynamically. Meaning, in the starting, we won't be having this data at all, right? In the starting, we will create an empty HTML file, and then we will get this data from an API. Again, as I just mentioned, right? We will get this data from an API, and then we will create this table and individual rows and individual columns using JavaScript, right? And when we will be directly adding all of those elements in the DOM tree by using JS, right? So yeah, that's the project. Anyone have any questions about this, the understanding the project, that what we are going to build? Yeah, so we're going to make this crypto dashboard data, and we are going to fetch this data from an API, and then we are going to create this element dynamically using JS. So this is what the project is. So in the starting, we don't have any data on our browser. We will make an API call, get the data, and we will render it on the screen. Cool. Let's basically do one thing. Let me write S3, and let's say this is my crypto dashboard. Okay. Simple HTML S3, and then I'm going to create a table, and this table will be an empty table because we don't have any data as of now. So we are not going to we are going to add all of the table element dynamically using JavaScript. But I'm going to give the ID for this table, and let's say this is going to be crypto table. Okay. So now this is an empty table. Let me open this project with the live server. And so what we are saying as of now, right? So we can see this stuff. Let me center this whole stuff. And so I've written some CSS for it. Let me import this, link this CSS. Now, if I go here, we have this CSS crypto dashboard right here, right? We'll add okay, and nothing, there is nothing inside my table, right? So what's the task now? What we are going to do, right? So let me write what are the stuff that we are going to be doing here. So if you see, as of now, there is no element in my right. So there is no element inside my table, right? So we need to add element. We need to add rows and columns in our table, right? But we don't have any data. We don't have any data, right? The question arises: how can we get the data? How can we get this crypto data that I showed, right? So this data will be actually available. We'll be getting this data using an API, right? So basically, this API will be basically nothing but it's basically it will when I will call this API, it will basically connect me to a server, and that server will send me the data, right? So again, it will act as an interface to between my client and server, and I will make a request, and it will send some data, right? So let's get the data, and I think I have. So let's okay. So first, let's see that how can we get this data using JavaScript, right? So I said that the solution for this is we can make an API call and get crypto data, right? The question arises: how do we make API call? How to make API call in JS, right? What's the percentage is the happening live? Yes, Ramanuj, this data are coming live from the API, so it will be live. Can anyone from the chat tell me how can we make this API call in JS? Anyone from the chat? Using Rapid API? No, I have the API actually. The question is how can we make an API call in JS? JSON, Anuj is saying JSON. How to make using fetch, right? So we'll be making this fetch. We have this fetch API, which is available in our browser, right? So remember here I was talking about that in browsers we have something called as web APIs, right? So similarly we have something called as fetch. Now what fetch does is that if you have to get this data, for example, let's say this is my client, right? This all the crypto data will be available on, let's say this is something called as crypto server, right? So this crypto server will have all the data that we need, right? We need to basically make this call to the crypto data, crypto server, and this crypto server will basically send me the in response this will send me the crypto data, right? Now we can make this call. Obviously we know how to make this call, so that is we have an API for that, right? But how does this client make this request, right? So we have something called as fetch. We can call this fetch, and remember one thing, that once the client make a request to this server, uh, it this whole process do not get happen immediately, right? Because it takes some time to be right, it takes some time to get this data. The reason being is that you will make this API call. This API call will go to crypto server will fetch this data internally using whatever logic they want to do, right? Using some logic they will fetch this data, and then they will send you back this data. Now this data is getting transfer over network, right? Internet. So reaching all of this data to you to your client will take some time, right? So we cannot say that so it will not happen immediately, right? So to basically to process all of this thing, we have something called as fetch, and this fetch basically actually returns a promise, right? um, a promise okay, so this returns a promise, meaning that once we invoke this fetch, it will not get this data immediately to us, right? But it will return your object called as promise. It will say that, okay, I don't have the data right now because, okay, I have made the request from your behalf to server. I do not have this data as of now, but I will get this data in some time. And once this data once I have this data, basically, um, I will inform you back, right? So that's how basically things works here, right? So promises basically promise you to return a data. In both cases, either your request will be success, they will return you the data in that case, and in other case, if your request basically is not fulfilled, they will basically return you an error, right? So either your promise will be resolved or it's rejected. So there is a two state that promises use. How to apply that fetch? Yeah, so we'll see that. So let's go in JS, and let's link this JS in our code. So we can do this linkage using the SRC keyword. It will be here. And all right. So here I will create a function called as fetch crypto data, and going to make this function as async, right? Now, why I'm going to make this function async? Does anyone of chat? Can anyone of you tell me what happens when you make a function async? Anyone from the chat? All right. So the reason of me being writing this function is async. Yeah. So so that whenever you make a function async, first of all, it returns you a promise, right? And browser internally understand that, okay, I'm going to run this function, whatever you're going to write inside of this function, I have to run this. It is going to be executed in async order, right? So that's why you can make a function async. And another thing, the important thing is that once you make a function async, you can actually use await, right? And let me write it, then I think it will make much more sense. So for a moment, let me write it directly, and then we will basically get it this. So first of all, let me get the URL, and okay, give me a sec, everyone. All right. I think now you can see my screen. So I wanted to get this API for you. So URL is this. So we have this API URL on which we are going to make the request. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to get the response. And to get the response, I have to call fetch. And inside this fetch, I'm going to write pass this URL, right? Now, whenever you make an API call, or whenever you make an HTTP call, right? So once you're going to make this call to the server, right? Remember, in this stuff when I said that whenever you're going to make an API call, you have to specify the type of request that you are going to make, right? For example, when I went ahead and typed in the google.com, remember that I showed you there was a request that was your client, our client was making. And if I go here in header, the request method is get, right? So a get method is generally used whenever you're making a request and you want to get some data from the server. You have to make the request method as get, right? So here in our example, we want to get some data, obviously, right? So we have to make this request method as get, right? But if you're using fetch, you don't have to specify this request method, right? Reason being is that by default, so you can specify it like this. Even if you don't specify it, by default, this fetch will use this get method itself, right? But for the sake of understanding, let's use specify the method also, right? So I'm making this fetch. Now this fetch will make a call to the server, right? And it will take some time to get this data back, right? So what technically I want to do is I want to move to the next line of code only and only once I have the response back from the server, right? So remember, I inform you that getting the data from the server will take some time, right? Why? Because the data transfers happen. Yeah, the data transfer happens. Yeah. So the data transfer happens over a network, internet, so it takes some time. So what we can do is that we can use a keyword called await. Moment you use await, your JavaScript will move to the next line of code, and only once this fetch have got the data from, right, when the fetch is resolved, meaning that it will move to the next line of code only and only once it got the data from the server, right? This is what this await keyword does. Now to use this await keyword, I have to make this function async, because we can only use await keyword inside a async function. And why we can use await keywords inside async? Because you can only await on promises, right? You can only use you can only await on promises and async, right? So this fetch returns your promise, obviously, and you have to specify you have to make the function async, right? So now let's move here. So we got the response. Now here we can get the data. So let's get the data from here. And to get the data, I have to convert this response into JSON, right? So I have to use this function called response.json, and you can use await here again. So this response.json also takes some time to get the URL link we will share. Don't worry about that. So we can use await here, and then we'll get this data. And for a moment, let me log this data for you, right? So let's say data, and I will show you this data in console. And we'll see the structure of the data, right? So this is fine. We have successfully written our code, right? But here, can anyone can any one of you find some problem in this approach? Suman, if you don't want to use async await, then we have to use the concept of promises or callback functions. Tejas, if you have to define a post method, you can set the method as post here. So can any one of you notice some problem here in this code? Can any one of you notice chat any problem in fetch crypto data function? So we don't have to write then because we are using async await. All right. So you see the problem is that if you're calling this fetch, right, it's an async function, so it can succeed or fail, right? So let's say that due to some problem, the server didn't respond anything, right? It threw an error to you, right? Now, in case of error, you need to handle that error, right? You need to be aware that, okay, you made an API call using fetch, it resulted into an error, right? So you need to handle these errors here. So here we are calling multiple awaits, right? So whenever you're working with async and await, what you need to do is that any of these functions can return you error, right? So this fetch can return you error, this response.json can throw you error, right? So you need to handle this error. So to handle this error, we have to use the try catch. So you can wrap all of this code as try, and then if any one of the code in try throw an error, you can catch it inside catch block, and you can log it here using console.error error in fetching data, right? And you can just basically handle this error like this. Cool. So this is what I wanted to listen. So this is fine. We are able to make this API call, get this data as of now, right? Now the thing is that how do we invoke this function? Yeah. The next question is that how can we handle this fetch crypto data function, right? How can I make this call? So we can do something like this: fetch crypto data, and you can call it like this. I don't want to call directly like this. I want to call it as soon as my DOM tree is loaded, right? So initial DOM tree is loaded. So what you can do is that you can attach this. You can listen on an event, right? So let me say document dot add event listener, and there is an event that get fired as soon as your DOM is loaded, right? And this it's called as DOM content loaded, right? So whenever your DOM tree gets loaded, right, your browser fired this event DOM content loaded. So we can listen on this, and we can attach a function that whenever this event gets fired, we want to call some function, right? So we can attach this function, and JS will call this function for you whenever this event is fired, right? So this is the syntax to add an event listener. Here we are listening on the DOM content loaded event, but you can listen on other events in JS also, right? Like on blur, on click, right? On hover, all of those events you can listen. So that's how basically you can write some code to listen on event listener. So this is fine. Let's see if this works or not, right? So I will go. I think we already have this code open inside browser. So let me go here and go inside console, and you will see, folks, that we have this data, right? And I can show you the request also. So if I go and refresh this page, you will see that we made this call here, right? So this is the request URL, this is the get method, this is the status code 200, meaning that server had the request was successful and server has sent the data. We can go to the preview and you can see the data that was returned by the server, right? So this is the data that was returned by the server, and remember we also logged this data, so this is also present here, meaning that we are getting this data from the server and it is working perfectly fine for us, right? Cool. I think this step should be clear to every one of you. Any doubts from this step, the whole stuff, that how we are getting this data from the server? Anyone in the chat? Any doubt? Any questions? No doubt. Perfect. So now that we have this data available, it's time for us to render this data, add this data inside our UI, right? And basically, and to display, render it on the UI, right? Can we fetch any data? Ganesh, you can fetch it. You can fetch, if you have an API, you can you can fetch data from it, right? So you can make the API call using fetch. So if you have the URL where you want to send a request, so fetch internally make a HTTP request, right? So you can make this request using the fetch. Or some website may need permissions. It depends if they allow you to send you the if they have added some securities or some authentication on these APIs. If there is any question, please let me know. If hey, I think I should be. Yeah, I'm back. Cool. So let me share my screen. All right. So we are creating this function, create dash row, and this will basically take the row of one data, right? And then it will create a one row first, right? So if I go back and show you our UI, you can see that what we really want to create this one single row, right? And we have to create a function which does create this one row for us, and then we are going to call this one, we will iterate on all the data that we received from the dashboard, right? and then we'll create this function, and this function will basically create all other rows for us. We have to write a function to create this row for us. Cool. Let me see how we do this. All right, folks. So let's basically try to so let's try to create this function called as create crypto dash row, and this will create a row for us, right? And we will call this function to render all our cryptos data, right? So this will be my crypto row, and this is basically document. So we can create a element using document.create element, and let's create a tr for us, right? This is going to be a crypto row, and then what we can do is that we need to create columns, right? So the second step is we need to create columns, and once we create the columns, we can append these columns in our rows, right? Okay, so now the question is that if you go and see our requirement, this is our crypto data, right? So we have we have one column two for the icons, we have one column for the crypto name, we have one column for the crypto symbol, we have one column for our prices, and then there is some column for volumes, and then there are some columns for the percentage thing, and then there is some column for market cap, right? So the question arises, how can we create all of these columns, right? So once the very naive solution is that we can go and create these individual columns, right? We can create one TD, we can add this Bitcoin, the name of the crypto data inside this TD. We can create one TD and basically add the symbol. One we can create one TD and add these prices, right? But that solution is not very efficient because you have to write code. You have to write code again and again, right? So we can basically run a loop, and and we can basically basically stores information that what we need to render on the first index, what we need to render on the second index, what we need to render on the third one, and so on so forth, right? So that's the one solution that we can think of, right? So let me do that. Let me basically create a array of columns and basically store what all information that I need to basically render on these columns, right? So to do that, let's say this is going to be my crypto columns. This will be an array, of course. Remember, because we're going to iterate over this, and I'm going to store objects on every array indexes, right? The reason why I'm going to store index is not a value, right? Because I'm going to store multiple. I need to store multiple information here, right? Uh, so the CSS file, yeah. I will show you the CSS file as soon as we start using it, right? I'm waiting to make full crypto API page. Yeah, cool. What I was saying is that we are going to store some information for every node, right? So the first information that I'm going to store is that the tag name, right? What's the tag that what is the name of the tag that I'm going to create for this individual column, right? Now, why this information is important? This information is important because here you are going to create an image tag, and for all of the other stuff, you might need to create a span tag, right? So you need this information. So first, we need to store this tag name. So let's say for the first one, I am going to create an image, and then we might need to store class name also, right? So what is the use of this class name? This class name will allow us to give dynamic classes to our individual columns, right? So I'm going to need that. So I'm storing it right here, and then I'm going to store the name of the property which will get me the data here, right? So if the name of the property which will get me the data for this image from our crypto data, right? So let's basically go and see the output of our crypto, right? So if you go and see that if I have to get the image from this crypto, I have to access this image field, right? So I'm going to store this information in the name section. So let me paste it here, right? This looks fine. So for every element, what I'm going to do is that for every index, I'm going to store the tag name, the class name, and the name of the image, right? So by default, I'm going to give it all of them. I'm going to give a TD class. So let me copy paste for all of our elements, right? So let's see for what's our second requirement. So the second requirement is, so we can keep it as a span. This one is also span. So for all of them, we can keep the tag name as a span. So let me change this. So this is going to be span. This is also going to be span, span, and span. All right. So here we are going to access the name of the Bitcoin. So let us see that where we are getting the name of this Bitcoin. I think this should be a name property, right? So we have this name property. So we can access the name of the crypto using the name property. So let's get here and let me write it as a name. And the next one is basically symbol. So this is a symbol. So we are getting this symbol from the symbol. So I can write the symbol here, and And then the next is nothing but the price, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, the price. So let us see in which field we are getting the price. So we have this one, simple price. And after price, we have volume, percentage change, and market cap. So let's go there. Let me get the volume should be total volume or total supply. Let's say total volume, right? And after that, we have percentage change. We have two more fields: percentage change and market cap. So if I go here and to fetch the percentage change, it should be all time percentage change, right? This should be the value. So let's write it here. And then for market cap, the market cap is this one. It's going to be like this, right? So what I have done is that I have created my columns, and for every index I have mentioned the tag name, the class that I need to give, and the property name using which I can fetch this data, right? Okay, so if yeah, so now that I have it, let us see how can we create these rows, right? So let me say create columns, and I will pass this crypto data, obviously, and but also I'm going to pass this crypto row, right? And we'll see that why I need to pass this crypto row, right? In a some time. So let's go there and create this function. The crypto row, and let's say data. All right. So to create this element, to be column for table columns. What's the name of this? This is crypto columns. Just a minute. Right, and here we have to do a couple of things, right? So first we need to create a TD. We need to create, right? We need to assign value to element, and then once we are done that, we can append the element to TD, and at last we can append our TD to row, right? So this is what I'm going to do. Cool. All right, so let us see. Let us do this stuff quickly. So let's create the column. Let's say this is going to be my crypto column, and we can create it using document.create element, and we can use this TD, and then we can create our element. So this is going to be column element, and to create this one, I'm going to create element. I'm going to fetch the name from the column dot tag name. So this is column dot tag name, right? So remember, I have basically mentioned the element name inside the tag name property. I'm going to use this one, right? Now I have to do one more check here. If my column name, and this check is going to be only for image. So if my the check is going to be on the tag name here. So what I need to do is that if my column dot tag name is equal to image, right? So I have to handle this separately, right? What I need to do is that I need to set the source property of this element, right? So I have to go here and say that the column element dot src should be equal to column, and it should be equal to data column. We need to get the image property, and where I'm storing this the property to access from the data, I'm storing it inside the name field, right? So here I can go here and I can say that it should be column dot name, right? So we'll get the source of the image from here, right? Once we are done with this, uh, we can do a couple of more things. We can set the so let us do this thing. So if that's not the case, right? If that's not the case, if the tag name is not image, what we need to do is that we need to basically set the text content of this. So I can say column element dot text content. This is going to be equal to get the data from the data right? So we are receiving this as a crypto data. So this should be crypto data, and this should be crypto data. We can get this value from column dot name, right? And once we are done with this, so we have followed this stuff. We need to create an element, which we are doing it right here. We need to assign a value to element. This step we are doing it right here. We need to append the element to td, right? So this we need to do. So let me do that. Let me say crypto column dot append child. We can append it using append child, because this need to be the child of the crypto column. So we can append this right here, and then we need to append this td to our row, right? So remember, I got this row here. So this should be fine. Crypto row dot append child, and I can basically append the row finally. Crypto column. Is this crypto column? Yeah, it is. Cool. So yeah, this is it about this looks good as of now. So let me repeat what I am done. So I am iterating over all the columns, right? I am fetching after iterating, I am fetching what. So I'm creating a TD, right? This is for the column, and then I'm creating an element. And what element I need to create, I am basically getting that data from the columns array that I have created, right? I have handled one such scenario that if there is an image, right? If there is the tag name is image, then I'm setting the source property, source attribute of the image, and I'm reading the value from the crypto data name, right? And if that's not the case, I'm setting all other values inside the text content, right? And then I'm appending this element inside the column, and then I'm appending the column to the row, right? So this is good. This looks very good. So now here, this will mostly complete our create column, right? Now if I go here inside my create crypto dash row, so I'm calling this create column function, right? And this will create the column and append it inside the row. Now I need to append this row at my inside my table, right? So remember, I have created this table here, crypto table, right? So I need to append all the rows inside this table. So to do that, first and foremost, I need to access this table, right? So let's say this is going to be crypto table, and this we can access using the ID. So I can say get element by ID, and let me paste this name here, crypto table, right? And then we can go crypto table dot append child, and we can append this crypto row, right? Okay, so our create crypto dash row is also complete, right? All I need to do is that I need to call this function, and after I iterate for every crypto data that is present inside that we are getting in the response, right? So to do that, I can simply use an iterator, and I can say that crypto of, and I can actually mention this as a crypto items, crypto of crypto items, or to be more precise, item of crypto items. And we can call this function uh, create crypto dash row, and I can simply pass this item, right? Cool. So let's see if this works or not, and then we'll basically do one more round of. I will repeat everything that I have done, right? So this looks fine. All I need to do is that I need to add some styling to this, but let's see if this works or not. So if I go back here, refresh this, we got error in fetching. Why so? Let me go to the network. Switching protocols. Interesting. Yeah. So now we got this stuff. Okay. Again, we are getting error in from the API. Let's refresh. Why your data is not? Okay, we got the data. That's fine. Could not establish connection. That's fine. So let's see. We are so our data is not getting a pendant here, right? Let's see what the mistake we are doing, right? So if I go back, this is my crypto dash row, and I've created a crypto row called the crypto create columns. Then I'm appending this columns append child inside my crypto table, right? And we are calling this for every crypto items, right? So we can put a log here, and we can go and see that what's the data that is coming here, right? So let's say this is going to be data, and let's log the crypto data, right? So that we know that this function is getting called how many times, right? So we are creating columns. So and after that, once this row is done, we are basically appending it on here. Let me go to create columns. The here we are appending, iterating over the this one, and then we're creating a TD. We are creating an element, and then we are performing some adding some stuff on this. Then we are adding this element inside the crypto column, and then we are adding this crypto column inside the crypto row, right? So yeah, this should be fine. Let's see. So let me refresh. I think my while loop is not getting called. Hmm. So we are getting this data for only one item, right? Let's log the response. I think we are. Let's log the response here. This is crypto data, and it should basically be whole crypto items. If I go back here, refresh this, we are getting this crypto data, but we are only calling it once. Make sense? Let's use for each. I think there is some issue. For each of items. So let's use basically map because this is function, so we can use map. So this is fine. Crypto items dot map, and this would be item. We can go here and then we can call crypto dash row. We can pass this item, and internally also I can try to go here and say columns. What's the name of this? Crypto columns. Crypto columns dot map. This is column, so, and we can put all our logic right here. Right. All right. So now let's see if I go here, refresh. Okay, this is not working. Yeah, let's see what's are we passing this as the right stuff or not. This is crypto one, that's fine. All right, folks. So let's try again. So so we have a okay. Let's see. We have a similar code. What's the mistake that we are making? So if I go to crypto and go to index.js, let's copy the index.html, paste it right here. All right. So now you can see this yeah. So now we can you can see that we are basically rendering everything, right? So this is now working fine, right? So let me explain you what I have done. Okay. So here let's start from here, right? So I fetch this data, right? So I made this API call. I'm getting this crypto data from the response. Then I'm iterating over this, right? And then I'm calling this function called add crypto dash table row, right? This function will I'm defining this function here, right? So I'm defining this function here, and inside of this, I'm creating this tr element. Yeah, I think screen is visible, right? Yeah, it is. Oh, it is not. Let me try again. I think you can see a screen now. See my screen. Can anyone confirm? I think if you can see my screen. Not yet. Yeah, yeah, now I think it is. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so let me explain what I did. So I'm making this function call fetch crypto data. I'm getting this data, right? And then I'm iterating over this data, and I'm calling this add crypto dash table function, right? This add crypto dash table basically will create a tr element, and then I'm calling this function called as create columns, right? So in create column, I'm passing this create row element as well as this crypto data, right? So the whole logic for creating columns that it should create all the columns, and then it should basically add all those columns on my current row, right? And after that, once I'm done with creating columns, I'm appending this crypto row element on my current table element, right? So let me go to the create columns and see how I'm getting it, how I'm making it work, right? So inside this create column, I'm iterating over this columns function. Yeah, so I'm iterating over this column function, and then I'm creating a td, right? Then I'm creating an element using the tag name. Then I'm checking if this element is basically an image or not, right? If this element is the element is this element is the image, then I'm assigning the source property, right? After that, I have did some more checks, right? So what I have done is that I'm checking if I'm going to show the change percentage or not, right? So in this change percentage, I need to basically format the data, right? So I'm converting this decimal to decimal place, and then I'm adding some classes here, right? So I'm saying that if the change percentage is positive, then add the class green. If it's the change percentage is negative, then add the class red, right? So here we are doing this, and then we are adding this content, and inside this content we are adding the values. And one little change I have done is I've added some prefix, right? So what's the role of this prefix? So the role of prefix is for this. So if I go here, you will see that here we are seeing a prefix dollar. Here we are seeing the prefix as market cap, right? So to add this market cap and dollar, I have basically added this prefix, right? So I'm appending the prefix, and then I'm adding all the classes, and then appending all the element inside the column, and then appending the columns inside the row, and that's it. Cool. So this is it. This is what we are doing, and that's how we are able to basically create our dashboard. Yeah, we need to practice. Let me someone said that to show me the style.css. So in the style.css, you will see that I've written a center container class. This one is basically making my basically dashboard aligned to the center. Then I'm written some css for rendering the image, right? And then I have basically written a function to transform my symbol to capital, right? So you see that um, I am rendering this symbol as a capital BTC, right? So this, in order to make it work, I have given this text transform to uppercase, right? So this text transform basically convert everything to the capital letter. Also inside the crypto dash, I've made this I've given the background color as black, and then the color to this one. So this is all css, nothing fancy here, very basic stuff, mostly using classes to give my to make everything to give the styling. The one thing that you should notice is that I'm giving all these classes name dynamically, and I'm using this class name property to give the class name, right? I'm not giving it individual styling. So moving forward, uh, yeah, we'll save the css and js, of course. Moving forward, right, this is a good practice if you're working with tables, right? And it might be possible that you might be working with very large set of data, right? So whenever you work with tables, you can basically follow this approach. This will basically and meaning is that you can define the structure of your column, right? inside array, and to basically access the data and to give the class name, to create the element, right? And if you are doing some formatting inside of your data, you can use prefix and suffix for that, or in fact you can use some functions also if you want. So you can all put all of those meta information like this, and then this will allow you to basically add all of those stuff by iterating over it, right? So this will allow us to use a loop and do this this inside the loop, and you will basically save yourself by writing some repetitive code. All right, so any doubts, anyone? Or should I repeat the whole thing from the starting? ग्रिड्स कब पढ़ाओगे सर? ग्रिड्स सीएसएस के क्लास में पढ़ लेंगे. We'll share you the codes. Actually, we'll update those stuff, those things inside. We'll update that in the description. What is the role of DOM content loaded? All right. So you see, basically this DOM content loaded is an event, and it gets fired by the browser once it basically finish creation of the DOM, right? For example, here this is all the HTML that we have written, right? And in the starting, I explain you folks that basically, yeah. So I explain you that JavaScript basically read this HTML file, and it will start creating DOM tree for us, right? Now you don't want to execute any of the JS code before creation of the DOM tree, right? Because so it's a standard that we should not be executing JS code before creation of the DOM tree, right? Because it might be possible that using JavaScript you are trying to manipulate this code, right? So you can see that we are basically manipulating DOM using JS, meaning that we are creating elements and we are appending childs to it, right? So we are directly accessing the DOMs element using the at some time we are accessing the DOM elements like the IDs. Then we are creating these elements and we are appending it inside the DOM. So we are updating this DOM, right? Now your whole function, this whole this JS code should be executed only and only once your DOM creation is finished, right? Because if your DOM creation is not finished and you are invoking this function, then it will create it will start throwing an error, right? So to make sure that you call this function only once your DOM creation is basically finished, you can listen on this event listener called as DOM content loaded, right? And this gets fired once your DOM tree creation is finished. So that's why we are adding we are basically listening on this event, and we are invoking our function called as fetch crypto data on this event. So as soon as browser will go, and so let me explain you the whole flow. So browser will read this HTML file. It will create DOM tree, right? And initially in the DOM, we don't have anything, right? So we have an empty table, right? We have this S3 and we have an empty table. Now, as soon as this DOM tree creation is finished, JS will basically load this JavaScript will basically fire this event called as DOM content loaded, right? Now, as soon as this event is fired, we are basically asking JS to call this function fetch crypto data. So JS will call this function fetch crypto data, right? Paste the I will paste in some time. Give me a couple of more minutes. Let me explain this whole stuff. So we are calling this function fetch crypto data. Here we are basically inside this fetch crypto data, we are basically making an API call. We are getting this data in the response. We are converting this response into this JSON, right? And then we are iterating over this all data, and we are creating a table row, right? We are calling this function add crypto dash table row, right? So we are creating a row for us. Now here inside of this, we are creating a tr element, right? and then we are again calling this function called as create columns, right? So we have created a tr, now we want to create columns. So let me go to this function. So inside this create columns, we have already basically defined the structure of our columns inside this table. So our individual structure looks like this. So every column has basically a tag name defined, a class name, a name from which it can access the data, right? And then a prefix, right? So we are iterating on this column, and then we are creating a td for every column, and then we are creating the element for this td, right? We are creating this element like this, and we are seeing that if this element is an image, then let's add the image that is coming from the data inside the src. If it's not the image, then we are checking is it basically the change percentage or not. If it's a change percentage, then we are converting this change inside in decimal, and then we are also checking if the change is in positive or negative. If the change is positive, then we are adding a green class, and if it's a negative, then we are adding a red class, right? So as of now, all our data are in negative. You can assume the condition of cryptos, right? It's all falling. So after that, we are basically appending this content to our element, adding this content to the element, and then appending this element to our class. Also adding the class to this element, and then appending this column element to the column, and appending the column to the element. That's it, right? So this is all the flow that this is how our code is getting executed, and at the end of it, if you go and see the HTML element for us for our, you can see that in the starting we added a single empty table, and now we have this much of trs, right? And every trs have a couple of these of tds, and you can clearly see that every tds have a span inside it, and which have a class, and it has some values, right? But initially when I loaded this if I go and show you my HTML file, we don't have this much any trs here, right? So we are adding all of this tr dynamically using js, right? So this is where basically dom manipulation comes into the picture, right? And that's where dom manipulation is so powerful, that you can dynamically add, delete, and right here we are dynamically adding all our elements using js. In fact, if I show you the DOM tree of this, right, in the starting, what was looking like a simple stuff, you can say that inside body, now we have quite a lot of DOMs. So if I go here, let me minimize this table, right? So in my body, you can see that at the top we have this div, which have a class called center container, right, which is nothing but this. And then inside of this div, if I go back, inside of this div we have an h3, right? The name of the h3 is crypto dash, right? So I can expand this. Then it has some text, and then it has a table, right? So this table has something called as id as crypto dash, right? So if I go back here and show you the id, here we are giving the id, right? So this dom tree have this id as crypto dash, right? And then it has some text inside of this. If I expand this table, you can see that this table have quite a lot of trs, right? So 1 trs, tr2, 3, I think it will have 10 trs at least, right? So start from 0, it's going to 9, right? And every trs have a basically I think 6 or 7 tds. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 tds, right? And in right, so you can clearly visualize this dom tree, right? You can clearly visualize that this tree is starting with html. It if you go to body, so for example, let's say if I want to access this table name element, right, using the id crypto dash, right? So how can I access this? So once you say get element by id, you are actually going inside this tree, and you are accessing that. Okay, you're trying to fetch that. Okay, is there any dom object with the id crypto dash present inside of this tree or not, right? Because you're accessing it using ids, and the good thing about ids are they are unique, right? So they are unique. So yeah, let me share you the url link. Yeah. So the good thing with IDs are unique. So whenever you define an ID in a HTML file, it should be unique across, right? So the fastest search happens through the IDs, right? Because you can search using IDs very fast because they are unique in nature, right? For example, if you want to fetch it using TDs, right? Let's say you want to run a query document dot get query selector all and or document dot get element by tag name, and you pass the tag name as TD, right? So you can see there are a lot of TDs here, right? So to fetching an element by tag name takes really lot of time, but fetching the element using ID take very is the fastest one, all right? And why it's fastest? Because there can be no duplicate TDs IDs that are present inside your DOM tree. Right, so yeah, that's it about our course, and I think from in today's workshop, I think this is all I wanted to discuss. Is there any doubt, any questions? Any questions, chat? uh, I've shared the URL in the I've shared the URL in the chat. I have a doubt regarding making layouts. Gani, you can use Figma. There is a design tool called as Figma. So you can use Figma to create interfaces and it to present your idea in that. Any other doubts, anyone? Chat, if you have any doubt regarding the today's session, how to link interfaces. You can create a prototype, Gani, inside Figma, and you can do that. Uh, I think to getting into Postman, I think you need to be good with development. Postman is one such organization which focus majorly on development. So be pretty good with development, make some really good projects, and you should have a passion for development. I think if you have that, I think you can get into Postman. All right, folks. Then uh, you can check out AccioJob. Basically, so we basically keep taking this kind of workshops, and we basically teach a concept with the live project by using these flows. So you can check out our platform, and we have I think batches that's going to be live in the coming week. So if you want to learn development, and if you want to be pro in development, basically in full stack development, you can join in AccioJob, and you can start your journey. We basically help you to prepare. So we make you get ready from the very beginning. You don't need to be pro. All you need to have is that ability to learn, or you should be able to you should be interested in basically learning stuffs, and we have basically dedicated guided path for you to help you out, right? So we have instructor mentors and placement supports people out there who are working for you. So you can check out our courses and you can get enrolled, and you can start your development journey from there. All right, so thank you everyone.